and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Ride-On Optics. Ride-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rideonoptics.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by ManusX. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with ManusX. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
Today, I want to tackle the question, is a scared cop a threat to society? And this comes from a theme that I stole from Jim, which is a scared cop is a dangerous cop. And I want to deconstruct that a little bit because I think there are a lot of people out in our society these days who really legitimately believe that we would be better off in a world where law enforcement doesn't exist. And that might be taken to an extreme in the minds of some of the anarchists out there. But I think it's important that we sit back and reflect and ask ourselves, how often do the actions of law enforcement actually improve the outcomes of situations that we're in? And how often do we potentially make it worse? And I'll give you an example, not related to being scared, but just generally. If I walk into, let's say, a convenience store while I'm on duty and there is an armed robbery occurring, right? The guy's in there pointing a gun at the clerk, demanding all the money out of the register. And I walk in and I confront that individual while he's holding a gun to the clerk's head. Is that better? Is that a better solution than, say, doing nothing, backing off and waiting outside until the person leaves and then having the confrontation? This is an example of a time where inserting myself into the situation might lead to a worse outcome, right? If I walk into this robbery occurring and that person gets desperate, he might pull the trigger and shoot the clerk just because he's, gets startled or something. He might take the clerk hostage, which puts me in a difficult situation to try to resolve. And if I did nothing, odds are pretty good that they're just going to get their money and leave, right? And nothing bad necessarily happens. So letting the robbery play its course might be the better option in that case. It's just something to think about. So to come back to the theme that we're addressing in this particular episode about whether or not police officers pose a threat to society, I want to address that phrase, a scared cop is a dangerous cop. And as part of that little endeavor, I also want to talk about the things that we can do to make cops better so that we can get the outcomes that we want. Because obviously that's our goal. We're trying to manufacture and reverse engineer good outcomes. We want to make good decisions and help cops win and do the right thing for society, not make things worse, right? So the idea is that decision making in law enforcement is kind of the core of our job, right? There's shooting, driving, fighting. There's all these skills, legal stuff, report writing. There's plenty of stuff that we have to learn and be good at. But at the end of the day, it is our decisions and our judgment that lead us to good or bad outcomes. And in a lot of cases, the intentions of most cops are good. Most cops, I believe, get into this line of work for all the right reasons, and they do. They let their ethics and morals drive their decision making, and they're usually fine, right? But in many cases, the execution becomes poor. And what sounds good or reasonable in hindsight doesn't occur in the moments that you actually have to make those decisions. And that's because sometimes we have a hard time detaching ourselves emotionally from the situation that we're in because we're physically in it, right? And it's not just what you can see and hear on a body camera. It's also the stuff that you feel, the stress, the pressure, the that kind of like tense feeling of like, I might have to fight this guy. That makes me uncomfortable. Or I need to try to like put on a good front and show, like I'm in charge, I'm taking control here, and maybe he'll back off a little bit, or maybe I can soften. I mean, there's a whole lot of emotion that goes with that, right? And a lot of that's just emotional intelligence and communication skills, but also that's where that kind of fight or flight response comes in, right? And the fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous response, isn't simply about our survival in a lot of cases, right? Sure, there's life and death stuff that will cause that kind of response. But on the lower end of the spectrum, there's also things like my ego, my defense mechanisms. I don't want to be embarrassed in front of my friends. Think about people who have problems public speaking, right? There's no danger posed by speaking in public, but people will have that kind of some of the same sympathetic nervous response, the dry mouth, the flushed face, the sweating. That's the same sort of thing. And it's a subconscious assessment of that, right? Where they feel like self-preservation is a factor. And it's a lower level response than, say, getting shot at or something like that, right? But it's still part of that sympathetic nervous response. So that's kind of what we have to tackle, is that subconscious feeling of, even though there's no danger that comes from speaking in public, there's still a self-preservation side of me that will influence my decision-making and my performance, right? You've seen people get in front of a room and speak, and they're nervous and they have troubles getting the words out. And you're just like, hey man, just relax. Like, it's okay. Just get your, one thing at a time, plan out what you're going to say, right? It's the same kind of thing. We have to get past that mental barrier, right? That sympathetic nervous response happens in our subconscious, and we have to kind of break that down and figure out how we can just get up there and perform well and own the room, right? So what are the types of bad decisions and bad performance that we see in law enforcement? One of the common ones is the oh shit bangs, right? I'm in the middle of this fight or confrontation, and I have this panicked sort of feeling that I can't win or overcome. And so the first thing I reach for is my gun, because I feel like I have no other options. And then you see someone, in this physical fight end up shooting somebody who is quote unquote unarmed because they feel like they didn't have any other choice, right? And in a lot of cases, those really are losing fights, and those shootings are probably justified. Now, I want you to think about that. If you're someone who is thinking about a scenario where the police shot someone who is unarmed, and that's something that bothers you or has gotten to you, I just want you to conceptualize that a police officer, assuming that they are doing everything legally and correctly, is exercising their arrest powers to take this person into custody, and that person decides to fight with them. That should not mean that police officer should become disabled, hospitalized, incapacitated, or killed during the course of that, right? So if you are in a losing fight and you think that you might get to that point of losing consciousness, incapacitated, severely injured, or hospitalized, then there is absolutely a threshold at which that shooting could be perfectly justified, right? But in a lot of cases, a better alternative would be we teach cops how to fight better, and they have the skills and the tools available to them, the techniques available to them, the mental conditioning that goes with learning how to fight. Some of that's just a resilience thing, right? The knowing that they can overcome those sorts of things. If we arm them with those tools, then maybe we prevent that fight. So even though this is like one of those situations where you have these lawful but awful shootings, right? Where it's like, well, legally you can make that justification, but I don't think it was necessary because maybe they could have done this, or maybe they could have done that. It's like, well, maybe if the guy wasn't 6'3", 300 pounds, or maybe if the officer wasn't 5'2" and 130 pounds, everything would have been okay. Well, those are variables in situations that are going to come up, right? So some of those oh shit bang things manifest themselves that way. The other oh shit bang is the people who are just not expecting whatever happens, and they just immediately go to the gun. Like someone is in a corner of a room that they didn't think they were going to see there, and so they immediately assume it's a threat. It's just like a startle response. The, oh shit bang, literally, like you walk in the room and you just see a guy in the corner and you assume the only reason he'd be in the corner like that is to ambush me, right? And they just subconsciously that script plays out in their head, and maybe those are incorrect. And that's a perception issue. And it's a, when you look in that corner, you should be expecting to see someone issue. And again, these are things you can't learn in a classroom. These are things that you have to set up in simulated situations, right? Scenario-based, reality-based training, and let people experience and confront and deal with and debrief and learn from in the after action, right? And that's, again, if we want that to be favorable in real life, then we should probably do that in training. So that's kind of where all this is headed, but those are just a couple of examples. Another place I see poor performance in law enforcement, a lot of it has to do with communication, or I should say it doesn't have to do with communication, but it manifests or it reveals itself in communication. So I recently had I was on duty one night, and there was this new police officer. He'd only been on his own for, I don't know, a couple months maybe. And he gets behind somebody who he's trying to pull over, and they're not stopping. And he's on the radio, and he's like, this guy's not, he's going southbound. Like, and you're like, wait, are you in a pursuit right now? What are you doing? And he's eastbound in the apartments, and like, what apartments? Where are you? And what are you doing, by the way? Right. And you're trying to like communicate with this person, and they're just having trouble taking the situation that they're seeing in real life and conveying that to people with words. Right. Part of that is just because it's task saturation, right? You're overwhelmed by the things that you're dealing with. And part of it is you are impaired a bit by that adrenaline dump. We have a saying you've probably heard on the show before: when the adrenaline hits, you lose 100 IQ points, right? And that's because when our limbic system, that subconscious, starts getting fired up. And again, self-preservation, if you think about fight or flight, right? Sometimes that's, what are the emotions that you can tie with fight or flight, right? Anger and fear. They can manifest themselves in those ways. Like, this guy's not stopping for me. Oh my God, I got to do something. How dare he, right? And then you start to see people get all amped up about it. Now, people with experience, it's like, okay, cool. This guy's not stopping for me. I got a bicycle running for me southbound. I need some units to come into this area, do X, Y, and Z. No problem, because you've learned how to deal with that. But when you're new and you don't experience that, you don't have that detachment, right? That emotional detachment that I was talking about earlier. So again, you talk with that person afterwards, you say, hey man, like, remember LCAN? LCAN is a phrase that we teach to all of our recruits in our active killer training. Location, conditions, actions, and needs. Hey, I'm at this intersection. I have a bicycle that I'm trying to pull. It ended up being a bicycle because vehicle pursuits make people at my department very uncomfortable. You have to have a pretty good reason to chase a car. And so that was part of the discussion, was like, are you in pursuit of a car? Because it sounds like it, and we need to know more information if that's going to be the case. And he was having trouble articulating that, right? It ended up being just a bicyclist that wasn't stopping for him. And LCAN is a good way of kind of explaining that, right? I'm southbound from this intersection. I have a bicyclist not stopping for me. I'm going to continue following it this way, and this is what I need. I need, units to come into the area to try to contain it, set up a perimeter or something like that, right? Like, that's your template. That's your format, right? And hopefully that template or that format helps you detach, helps you kind of wrap your head around the situation and speak through it, and it gets your brain more cognitive, right? Use the thinking part, the executive part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, whatever you want to call it, to kick your sympathetic nervous system, to cause it to downshift, essentially, right? To cause it to be at a manageable level, right? Don't let the subconscious drive the ship, right? We have to drive the ship with our logic and reasoning and all that. So again, a lot of this has to do with sort of managing your energy. And I remember when I was fairly new, I remember hearing guys on the radio when they'd get behind like a stolen car, and they're like, you'd hear, they'd be like literally out of breath. Like, I got a car southbound. It's like, hey, just get up on the radio and say, hey, I have a car that's returning stolen. The license plate's this is the description. It's southbound on whatever. Is the air unit available? Start me a canine, right? Simple, straightforward. with that detachment. And I remember not wanting to be that guy on the radio. Like, it's like rule number 1, always be cool. Rule number 2, always know where you're going. Rule number 3, if you don't know where you're going, refer to rule number 1, always be cool. It's that always be cool thing. And even when you're not, like, fake it till you make it, right? So managing that sort of energy level when you get all excited is part of what will help you stay reasonable in the moment, right? So back to decision or examples of bad decisions, bad performance, pursuits, and communication. That's one of the other ways that you see itself. Another one that I see a lot is indecision or half decisions. And there's a lot of examples of this, but what you have to understand is that not making a decision is a decision all by itself. And so an example of this is you walk up to a domestic violence sort of thing, and you can hear a woman inside the house who sounds like she's just getting, her ass beat, right? She's screaming and crying, and, it sounds like a horror film or something. And you're thinking about whether you should go inside or not. And you're like, well, there's a lot of risks that go with forcing your way into someone's home, right? An unknown place like that. And with a suspect who is emotionally charged and aggressive and combative and knows he's probably going to be in trouble, right? There's a lot of risk involved in that, right? But the longer that you wait, the more damage is being done and the more harm is occurring. And so this is what we do, right? This is where you're supposed to be the knight in shining armor, right? The cavalry that's supposed to come help the situation be better. And not making that decision, slowing that down too much, is a decision by itself and potentially causes harm all by itself. Now, there's times to slow things down and to do that intentionally, right? To let the emotions subside, perhaps, to make sure that you have all your pieces in place, and that you have a plan and you can execute that effectively, right? But that's different. Deliberately waiting, that is different than not making the decision to go. The other one I mentioned was half decisions. And where I see this the most is in padded assailant drills in the academy. So we go out with the recruits to do one of their scenarios where they're going to get in a fight. And we're like, hey man, that guy in there's got a misdemeanor arrest warrant that's been confirmed. Go arrest him for me. Let's see how that works out for you. And the guy's not going to listen, not going to comply, right? And so they'll walk in there and the guy will be kind of argumentative and they'll say, okay, sir, I need you to turn around, put your hands behind your back. And then they'll kind of throw their arm out in front of him like, go ahead, take it. Take my arm. See what happens. And the recruit will go try to grab the person and they'll start pulling away. And inevitably what you'll hear is, sir, 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 with a deeper voice, sir. And they kind of get in this tug of war match with the guy's arm, trying to get it into control, right? And it's like, well, you made the decision to go hands-on and to try to establish control, and it's not going your way. And now you're kind of in this like, well, I'm going to keep saying something and I'm going to physically keep doing something, but I'm not just committing, right? What is the committing part? I need to either make a move, right? Change my control posture somehow, whether that means a takedown or getting a better control hold on somebody or striking the person, whatever that is, or potentially I need to just disconnect and try to approach this another way, maybe with less lethal, like OC spray, taser, if that's appropriate, something like that. So a half decision, right, is also a decision, and that's a poor one. Sometimes you have to make decisions with full commitment, because if you don't, you're giving the person too much time to think. And taking that much time out of your side of the fight and giving it to them lets them shape the outcome or the situation. And that's not what we want, right? So indecision and half decisions, that's another example of bad or poor performance. One that I see a lot is not knowing which template to apply. And not every scenario that a police officer will go to is going to fit in a template, right? There's just not, life is not that predictable. But in general, we have some template or some idea of how we're going to handle, let's say, an armed robbery or a burglary in progress. I think someone's breaking into my home, or a domestic violence dispute, or I don't know, insert whatever, like someone's breaking into my car and I'm watching them from the window, right? There's like a template to apply to these things, and you kind of have a basic idea of how you're going to handle it. And when you're faced with something a little bit novel and you're like, that doesn't fit neatly into one of my boxes, I don't know what to do. That's the scenario where you have to just make a call, right? Assess the problem and make a call. And so having that flexibility or adaptability is something that, again, you come up with over time and experience. And it's also something that you can work on in training, right? One of the big ones that I see, and this goes both directions, is either downplaying or minimizing crimes, right? Or embellishing on them, right? The guy was driving right at me, so it's aggravated assault on a police officer because he was driving past me. And it's like, well, do you know that he saw you there, or was he just trying to flee the scene and you happened to be there? Right? Like, let's not oversell this, because if we don't have a strong case to make that allegation, all it's going to do is make us look reactive and emotional down the road, right? If you take this guy to court, right, you arrest him, he goes to jail, and you go to trial, and you were just like, well, it felt like he was driving right at me. It's like, but was he though? Right? It just makes us look, again, reactive and emotional. So if he's really trying to ram you, then that's one thing, right? If you see him veer in your direction, then that's one thing. But if not, that's one of the problems potentially that comes up, is embellishing on stuff. But more often, what I see is people downplay or minimize it, right? An example of this would be a guy is doing a shoplifting, right? Let's say he walks into, I don't know, an electronics store, and he picks up some items that are for sale, and he tries to walk out the door, and someone tries to stop him, and they pull out a knife. And they're like, hey man, like, don't even think about it, right? And they walk out past the person confronting them, and they leave with the stuff. Now they just stole something, and in the process of doing so, they pulled out a knife, pointed it at somebody, right? And threatened them with it. That's a robbery. Now, that's different than someone like hiding something under their shirt and just sneaking out the store, right? Or running out the store. And a lot of times people will say, well, it was still just shoplifting, but then it was also a, threats and intimidation charge or an assault charge separate from the shoplifting. It's like, no, to execute his shoplifting, he used force or fear, right? That he met the statutory requirements for a robbery. That's different. That's escalation, right? Than just shoplifting. And a lot of times we'll see people downplay that and say like, well, it wasn't like he walked in there with a knife and pointed at someone and demanded something. It's like, well, no, but he also had that plan in the back of his mind as an alternative, clearly, because that's what he did, right? So minimizing stuff and downplaying it is also something that we can kind of get in trouble. The other one I see is like, what charges do you have on this person? Like, well, he just traffic offenses. Well, it's like, well, it's just traffic offenses, but he also ran when you tried to stop him. So there's obviously something more going on there than just a speeding ticket, right? There's probably he's wanted, or he's committing some other crimes, or he's intoxicated, or he's doesn't have a valid license. There's something more going on there. We just haven't figured that out yet. So anyway, these are just some examples of how you see performance get influenced in cops. And the reason that I give these examples is to explain that not every scenario of imperfect performance or decision-making is like shooting the unarmed guy, right? There's a whole lot of decision-making under pressure that cops do on a day-to-day basis going to these things that, one, are potentially still consequential, right? They can potentially lead to the shooting of an unarmed person, or potentially lead to saving a life if you needed to be decisive and take action. I mean, these things are still potentially, right, have consequence. But the other thing is these are also a window into the mind and the performance of these officers, and opportunities to learn and grow and to teach them, right? And the reason I think that's important is because at the end of the day, the best outcomes that we can engineer through training and experience has to do a lot with managing stress. And we can't really teach people how to manage that stress in a PowerPoint class. right? This is something that, a lot of people all over the country are doing a very good job of teaching de-escalation tactics and communication skills and teaching people about their implicit bias and prejudice and all of that stuff. And that's all fine. I don't have a problem with those things. But in a lot of cases, that's the only training that cops are doing. And you don't really learn how to manage stress like that. And so when you're in the moment, and this agitated, angry guy who just assaulted his wife is balling his fists and squaring off with you and telling you he's not going back to jail, and you're in that self-preservation mode thinking, oh my God, that's a big, scary man. I don't know if I'm going to win this fight. This is going to get ugly. Like, I might get hurt, right? You're not thinking about the class you took in 2019 or whatever that you learned about your, bias and communication skills. You're thinking about trying to save your own skin in the game, right? And the thing about that is it's not your skin in the game. Like, you're not thinking about that consciously necessarily. Your subconscious is interpreting what you're seeing. And this is why I say it's not just what you hear and see in body cam, right? It's what they are seeing in their mind. Subconsciously, your brain is making an assessment of that problem and going, uh-oh, that's a threat, right? Your limbic system is doing that, not your thinking executive part of your brain. And that fight or flight response starts to kick in, right? And you're not thinking in that same cognitive, rational, reasonable place as you would be if you're sitting in a classroom, for example. So we have to capitalize on managing stress, which means we have to introduce that in training on some level. And when we see things in real life that are lower level examples, a lot of times, we go through our entire shift and we might not make perfect decisions, but all's well that ends well, and no one else saw it. No one else cares. And so at the end of the day, do we want to sit there and poke at each other and, call each other out on all the things that didn't go perfectly? Or do we want to bullshit about our fantasy football team or something? No, those are the moments where you can say, hey man, what happened on that traffic stop earlier? Why couldn't you get the words out that was a bicyclist? Did you think about that at all? Do you know how that sounded? Hey, maybe we can pull the tape up and listen to that again. And I just want you to hear what you sounded like when you got behind that car or that bicycle, because you probably could have done a better job of communicating that. And maybe we could have got you help sooner and caught that guy instead of letting him get away. Right. It's no one cares because it was a low level offense and he got away and no one got hurt. Right. So no one really cares. But if you get better at those, then the ones that are serious, you're going to be better prepared to manage. Right. So I mentioned earlier that in a lot of these scenarios, communication is a big component because it's just how it reveals itself or manifests itself, right? And I need you to internalize that the stuff that happens externally, the communication thing, is a result of the things that's happening internally, right? Most cops or paramedics or pilots have interacted. They have a peer or someone they look up to or something, a colleague who is just cool, calm, and collected, right? And most of us also know the people who have a tendency to spaz out, to freak out a little bit, right? To have their hair on fire, to be all assed up. That's the technical term we use, right? They're all assed up. And the key is understanding that in a scenario where one guy is calm, cool, and collected and the other guy is frazzled, the scenarios are potentially exactly the same, right? And it's in the person's mind where they're experiencing it, right? That one person is calm and deliberate and able to process the information presented, even though it's imperfect, even though it's conflicting in many cases, even though their priorities are conflicting, but they can process that information in a calm and deliberate way and make good decisions based on the information that they have. And through that ability to make good decisions, right, good outcomes, they become more and more confident in their ability to manage those problems. And because of that, the stress that they experience is diminished, right? There's less stress because they're like, oh, okay, this is something that I can do, right? So that tendency to freak out versus be calm, cool, and collected, we got to see that, and we got to experiment with it, and we've got to try to shape it, right? And so that's where the effectiveness of and the quality of our training comes in. It's not just collecting hours. It's not sitting in a classroom or a PowerPoint learning about all of our, like I said, implicit bias training and all these things that from a academic standpoint make a lot of sense. Like these are boxes that we should check, right? But they fall short of managing stress. And that's the issue, right? All right. So let's apply all of that understanding, right? That kind of philosophical part of this to the lens of cops interacting with a suspect or an uncooperative person in the community, right? What are the emotions that might come up for a police officer? As I said earlier, that sympathetic nervous response, fight or flight, you can associate those a little bit with anger and fear. And it's important to kind of tap into that a little bit and be introspective, because a lot of cops are not necessarily otherwise aggressive or nasty. They're not hotheads or with bad tempers so much as just they're human. And that fight or flight response it's a real thing where, the emotions get high and you say things you don't mean. I mean, this has happened to anyone who's ever been in a fight with a spouse or a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, or any other family member or something, where people start saying and doing things they don't mean. It's not, at the end of the day, they're probably still good people, but their behavior sometimes in those moments are things that they wouldn't be proud of, right? This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com. So where does this happen to cops? Sometimes it's people not listening to their, authority. They get all fired up about like, well, give me your license and registration. Like, well, why'd you pull me over? Just give me your license and registration. Well, why'd you pull me over? Give it to me right now, because I said so, right? Like, this is my authority. And now I'm not going to deconstruct how that scenario should really play out, because you have to make a read on the individual you're dealing with and what actually, actual offenses you have under your belt. But in terms of what you can charge them with, which will vary from place to place, but think about how the officer's response and ego can interfere with a good outcome or, good judgment, right? What happens if we are trying to control or fight a suspect, take them into custody, and it's not going well, right? And now maybe that doesn't mean that they're on the ground getting pummeled, but you're sitting here trying to wrestle with this person and they're just holding you at bay. I want you to picture like the little kid trying to swing at a bigger person, and like the big kid is holding the kid's head and just preventing their strikes from hitting them. Just kind of holding them stiff arm out at arm's length, and they're swinging, but they can't reach them. Something like that, right? They're fighting or struggling with us somehow, and they're winning. That can be frustrating and feel kind of helpless when cops are supposed to be able to like take charge and arrest someone with the power of the law, whatever. And that can influence this. Sometimes people are posturing. They're not necessarily actually fighting with us, but they might be standing in front of us and balling up their fists and puffing their chest and demanding answers and telling you they're not going back and they're not going to do this. And, you need to come back with a warrant or, whatever it is. Like, I don't know. How do you respond to that situation? Is that something that you look at and say, oh, this is like, it's fine. Like, he's posturing, but it doesn't mean he's going to win this fight, right? Like, is that something you can manage, right? That's one of those scenarios where you might see this. Another one is just kind of along the lines of people struggling or fighting is like when they run away. whether it's in a car or they run on foot, and the cops catch up with them, and they might be pissed off that they ran, like, hi, caught you, because that's my job, is to catch you. Like, how dare you run from the police, right? It's like, well, suspects have a fight or flight response too. And that's an important thing to think about, right? Is that suspects have a fight or flight response too, and you can influence that, is the thing. So that's another place that maybe some of this stuff can start to stir up, and we have to watch out for and learn how to be level-headed about, right? And the reason I bring those examples up is because these are lower level, these are not a big deal in a lot of cases, but bigger picture, it can become a big deal. What if someone, let's go back to our convenience store example in the very beginning, you walk into the store and it's too late. Your hand's been shown, and this guy takes your clerk hostage at the convenience store. He's an obvious lethal threat. He's pointing a gun at the clerk's head, and that's a tough shot. What are you going to do? Because you're going to make an assessment on your ability to manage that problem, right? Subconsciously, remember, you're not going to sit there and calculate, okay, well, I'm about 7 yards away and this is my, no. Subconsciously, you're going to be like, is that a shot that I can make or not? And then the fight or flight response kicks in based on how heavy that response is, kicks in based on what you think you can do about that situation. That's a tough shot, right? And it has consequence, especially if you miss, right? What about there was one time I was driving home, and I used to live right by some train tracks, and there was a car stuck on the train tracks, and the guy sitting in the car was having some kind of medical episode, and there was a train coming. And I remember like this futile feeling of like, well, I can't really go up there to the train tracks with the train coming. Like that's a, it's a lose-lose in that case, right? Just based on the timing of it. And I remember like trying to get out of the car and thinking like, well, maybe I can get him out of the car. So I don't know, like you have a split second to figure something out, right? Like that's how it is. And, right at the last minute, the guy like woke up and got the car going and made it to the other side. And it was like, oh my God, sigh of relief, right? But there's that like decision-making that happens really quick where you're like, is this something I could do safely or not? And there's no like, it's full commitment, right? Like you either go and you help the guy and you save his life, or you don't and you watch him get killed. And there's a lot of not only stress in the moment, but post-traumatic stress that can come potentially from that as well, right? Yeah, maybe you're a hero, right? Maybe you get killed in the process. So it has consequences, right? And it's the same sort of thing. That's self-preservation. An active killer scenario is like the easy one, right? Should you go or should you wait? I mean, we always have to go for active killer stuff, but that is a scenario where, again, your assessment of your ability to cope with that problem is going to be a big deal. And that all falls back into your subconscious, which is kind of the big point about dealing with stress in terms of how do we learn how to get better, right? Is that it happens in our subconscious. It's not something that we can teach our way through, via PowerPoint or in watching your web-based training or whatever it is, or in a Zoom meeting. It doesn't work that way. Your subconscious is a product of a lot of things, among them your habits, your patterns, your tendencies. And this is where your tendency, right? Your habit of taking action, making a decision, make an assessment, make a decision, not just standing there and letting the environment dictate itself to you, right? That tendency will reflect if you are accustomed to that, right? And this is deep rooted. You have choices, alternatives, right? You've seen a lot of things. You have these kind of mental files of different outcomes that have occurred. And with all of that, you can bring it to bear in a new situation, right? That's potentially dangerous. But again, it's something that it's developed over time. And in a lot of cases, what we do or not do is also a product of the things that we have reinforced over time, right? So every time we have poor performance, but nothing bad happens, we reinforce that performance, right? If we don't get held accountable or we don't address the shortcomings, then they become okay. And then when we have the bad outcome and we get upset, it's like, well, what steps did we take along the way to mitigate the other issues, right? Like, one of my big pet peeves with law enforcement is this tendency of higher level, frontline supervisors and management to micromanage their police officers at a lower level. And the problem with that is that the sergeants and the commanders are not going to be at every call and every traffic stop with their officers. So the only people in those positions to make those decisions are the officers themselves. And if we micromanage them, over time, what happens is they never had to make decisions on their own. And so what do? They call back to higher headquarters. They get on the radio. Hey, Sarge, do you want me to do X or do you want me to do Y? And it's like, well, you're there, dude. Make a decision, right? And we've created this sort of culture in a lot of places. I know around where I work, it's been a thing. At times, it depends on who you interact with and stuff. But over time, you create this culture where you've micromanaged your people so much that they require being micromanaged. They have to be told what to do. Simon Says, right? Because we haven't taught them how to make their own decisions. So we reinforce these things over time. And that's problematic because the decisions and the solutions to the problems that cops are going to face in real life have to be strong enough, right? Those solutions have to be strong enough to override those primitive fight or flight response behaviors. And you can't do that from a logical and rational place all the time, right? It's something that you have to be conditioned to deal with and to be able to say like, okay, this is a difficult scenario, but I can manage this. Here are some options. Go with it. Make a decision. Go. And what a lot of people would describe that as is stress inoculation. And we've talked about this study before. The Rand Corporation, which is like a think tank research firm kind of deal, did a study on battlefield airmen about how to effectively, it's like all about performance under stress, right? Effectively making decisions under pressure. And I'll post a link to it, of course, but we've talked about it a number of times. It's relevant here. But they were looking at things like how do the training of different special operations forces add up to conditioning them to make good decisions, especially under stress, right? And so like one example is free fall, right? Military free fall. You jump out of an airplane, right? You free fall and you've got a parachute to deploy and there's a malfunction with that parachute. How long do you have to figure that out? Potentially the rest of your life. So you got seconds and you've got to work that problem. And you're probably panicking a little bit knowing that if you don't work it out, you're going to hit the ground real fast and real hard. So they looked at this and they looked at the training, kind of the inoculation of the different selection courses. And so Navy SEAL BUDS, Pararescue Indoc, Ranger School, whatever. And what they talked a lot about was recreating scenarios in training that have the same characteristics as those situations in real life that we're trying to prepare for. Now, do they need to look exactly the same? Do I need to throw you out of an airplane to teach you how to respond to that? Well, no, because if that doesn't go well, that's potentially going to have a bad outcome, right? So what are other ways we can do it? Well, what's the issue with falling out of an airplane and having a malfunction in your parachute? The scenario is time sensitive, right? We talked about that. The time that it takes to make a relevant or correct decision, right, is not the same as the time you might have available to manage the situation. Conflicting priorities. There's all kinds of things that can come up in a use of force scenario, like a hostage shot or an active killer scenario, right? Like a hostage taker, active killer type of scenario, right? There's your own safety, your own self-preservation, your own family, life, whatever. And then there's the life of others. Conflicting priorities, right? But also, let's say you go to an active killer scenario and there's a bunch of wounded people and there's still active killing going on. Conflicting priorities is, well, there's people dying that I can help right here, but there's also more people dying because they're getting shot over there. So which one do I need to focus my efforts on? And most of the time for law enforcement, that's going to be close with and kill the bad guy, right? Stop the killing, stop the dying. But that can be conflicting when you're walking past people who are screaming for help. And so we set that up in training, right? Conflicting priorities, because you have to work through those. We talked about the consequences, right? These outcomes are serious. And so in training, your outcomes have to have consequences. And ambiguity. How much decision making is based on things that we just don't know, right? A guy standing in front of you with balled up fists might or might not fight, might or might not try to kill you. So you can't just shoot the guy, right? You have to start at the lower level of the use of force continuum and work your way up a little bit. But it's ambiguous because you don't know, it's unpredictable. And so those are the sorts of characteristics that you can incorporate into high quality training to get them in that problem solving state with a little bit of like, pressure, right? Because you want to make them able to cope with that subconsciously, which means you got to get them there. You can't do it in the classroom. You have to pressure them. You have to pressure test this stuff. And the goal is to incrementally improve your capacity to do it and to build those mental files of, hey, this is what I did. And I mentioned that we reinforce this stuff, right, in our subconscious. These things have consequences, so we reinforce good and bad outcomes with like, hey, that went really well. I want to point out the things that went well. But when things go poorly, what do we want to imprint there, right? In our students, right? We do high quality training. We do stress inoculation. We do all this stuff. We build these scenarios and they just completely shit the bed and it goes poorly. What do we want to reinforce? Hey, you did a terrible job. You got yourself and your entire team killed. You have no place on this team or in this department. Okay. That's a horrible message, right? It's a horrible message. And if you leave them thinking that, and they ever face anything even remotely like that in real life, what's going to resonate in their head? The last time that I saw something like this, it went terribly. I got myself and my team killed, and I shouldn't have ever been a police officer to begin with. Something like that. And subconsciously, their fight or flight response is going to reflect accordingly. That's not good, right? If we're trying to improve their capacity to cope with this, it's, hey, these are the things that went wrong. There's consequences for that, right? You have to understand this is serious. But let's talk about what right looks like. And then we're going to run this again, and I want to do it right. I want you to leave with a win here, and I want you to see what it feels like to overcome this scenario, right? And maybe we dial the stress back a little bit, or maybe since they saw it once, we can kind of just tweak it a little bit and get them right back there, but they have some food for thought and you can give them a win, and we reinforce the good outcomes, right? That's where your high quality training comes in. And this is so important for real life stuff. You can, first of all, you can also do that reinforcement and recreate stuff from real life in training and debrief stuff in real life and use those for learning points. But again, you just want to do that with an attitude of, hey, like these are the things that went wrong or poorly, and a better outcome would have been this, or a better solution or better choice would have been this. Let's talk through that. That is what I want you to take away from, is not the thing that you did wrong that was in the past and over with, but like the path forward. Hey, next time that happens, remember, let's use the kid chasing the bicycle, like the rookie cop chasing the bicycle. Hey, I want you to think about LCAN the next time that happens, right? Location, conditions, actions, and needs. I want you to just think about that next time you run into a scenario like that and you're not sure what to say, you're not sure what to do. I want you to just come back to that. Maybe put it on a piece of tape and put it on your steering wheel. LCAN, right? And that way you can look right there at your steering wheel and be reminded of, these are the things that I need to say on the radio. Something like that, right? So you apply that to real life experience, and through that learning and that experience, you build confidence. People learn how to recover from their mistakes. That's a big one too, is how do you cope with failure? Like, if you win everything in training and you never feel what it feels like to lose, is that good? Because we know real life isn't that way. And so when you make a mistake in real life, are you going to completely shut down? No, we want people to be used to making mistakes on some level so that we could say like, hey, that's what that feels like. Let's correct it, right? Because there's no growth that happens only in our comfort zone. If we only stay where the outcomes are perfect, no growth occurs. And this is another problem with the micromanaging deal is if you don't give your guys enough rope to make their own decisions and to make some mistakes, enough rope to hang themselves with from time to time, they're never going to learn where the left and right limits are, right? Because they're always riding under this threshold of good outcomes. So recovering from mistakes is part of that resilience and mental toughness that goes a long way in motivating someone towards good outcomes. I think that's a big deal. And all of that is going to translate into good future decisions. And of course, to get there, that requires good leadership. So we covered some of the elements of good training, and I talked about the stress inoculation type of training that needs to occur along the way. And advocating for that is a big deal because it doesn't happen. It takes a significant investment. It takes a significant investment in time. It takes a significant investment in your instructor staff, right? And your core group of instructors, as well as like the people who are going to influence the culture. So this is a big deal. It's like not everything about the culture of an agency, let's say of a law enforcement agency, occurs at the academy. And we can't silo those two things too much, right? And one of the things that used to drive me nuts when I was in field training, or when I was in a regular patrol assignment and I was a field training officer, is when I worked with rookie officers who came from another FTO, and they said things like, the other FTO would say things like, yeah, that's how they taught you how to do it at the academy, but we're going to show you how we do it for real out in the streets here. Like, forget all that stuff you learned at the academy. This is how we really do it. If your culture in your department or your agency looks like that, you fucked up. You fucked up. That's not how it should be, right? The way things go at the academy, yeah, it's foundational knowledge, right? And we're going to build on that in field training. We're going to build on that in real life and in service training down the road. But those things should absolutely be in sync with each other. And if you have the people that are out there creating and sort of enforcing and shaping the culture, whether that's field training officers, whether that's just the senior people in a squad, or your, frontline supervisors, low-level managers, if it's separate out at the academy than it is in real life at the operational level, you've got problems, right? Those streams have to cross, is where I'm going with this. And that's something that you kind of have to force with good leadership, right? So advocating for good training and trying to force that means that you understand the risks. And the risks might be like the little r risks, like maybe we'll get some complaints, or maybe Officer Timmy or Officer Smith or Snuffy or whatever is going to handle, this one scenario kind of poorly. And we're going to have to discipline him a little bit, right? Or retrain him a little bit or something. I don't want you to be thinking about discipline per se. Sometimes it's warranted, right? But understanding the risks really like inherently understanding them means understanding which risks are okay to take and which ones are not. Like if anyone's going to get hurt or killed over it, no, we shouldn't take those risks, right? If it's going to get the agency sued, the effectiveness of the agency of law enforcement in that given community is above everybody, right? Those are the big R risks. But, having the guy get behind the bicycle that's not stopping from him and struggling through that a little bit, it's like, let's see where this goes for a minute, right? In terms of good leadership and letting people learn from their mistakes and learn from experience and letting them be exposed to the real world, right? This is like my little kid, right? I have a 3-year-old, and if he's playing on something and I'm like, hey man, you might want to stay on the ground. If you fall off of that thing, it's going to hurt. And then you let him climb up on this thing and he falls off and it hurts. It's like, yeah, I told you that was going to hurt. Like, I know doing that. Yeah. Is there some risk that he's going to crack his head open or something? Yeah. He might get hurt, might get injured. He might break an arm or something. But the flip side of that is he's going to learn the risk of climbing up high and not having good footing or good grip or a good hold on something. Right. And letting them learn that lesson on their own is important for making good decisions in life. So sometimes you have to be the parent and say like, all right, no, that's walking out in the street is a no-go, right? But falling off of a jungle gym maybe is acceptable. So understanding those risks and making those decisions is a big deal from a leadership standpoint. Understanding that those lower level people, the people you're trying to shape and influence the decisions of, lack experience and foresight. Now, micromanagers will say that they need to insert themselves into this scenario, whatever that might be, because their people lack experience and foresight. Well, the problem with that is you're not teaching them to gain experience and foresight, right? They need that insight to make better decisions in the road. So your job as a leader is to give them the experience and foresight, right? That's your job, is to kind of push them to learn and give them the experience and foresight that they need to have good outcomes. So it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? And again, this is where you have to be a good parent. There are scenarios where you're going to have to insert yourselves, and there are scenarios where you need to let them fall off the jungle gym. It's kind of where I'm going, okay? A lot of new guys, rookies and people who don't have that insight, that foresight, whatever, are probably going to be more comfortable with risk in a lot of cases, and maybe even reckless at times. But again, like, you need to let them learn from that and let them check themselves so they learn where the left and right limits are. One of the things, like a parenting concept that I heard once upon a time was, if you just let your kid wander free, yeah, they might gain independence, but they also, if they don't have anything to push against, right, rules or discipline to push against, then that limitless independence often gives them no direction in life. And that could be problematic, right? They need boundaries on some level. And so you've got to figure out where that is. But they've got to learn to dance between the lines a little bit on that. And a lot of that is just, it comes with maturity, right? It doesn't mean, where I'm going with this is, it doesn't mean you just don't supervise people and just like, okay, like, go ahead, do whatever you want to do, right? It just means you need to make an assessment of where everyone's at and give them a little bit of rope. So, with that, if you consider yourself a leader and you want to be a good one, or you already are a good one, these are risks that you are embracing. And you need to see your role as a coach or as a mentor, not so much a boss. I've always said that it makes a bigger impact on me if I work for a guy who I don't want to disappoint. Like, it feels like I'm disappointing dad is way more impactful than he might write me up. So that's kind of the culture that you want to have. You want to embrace that. Coaching, mentoring, every mistake that they make is an opportunity. You have to see that, right? You have to see it as an opportunity and embrace that. And part of embracing that means that if it does go poorly, and let's say you make a mistake, right? The leader makes a mistake. The micromanager who's trying to not micromanage his people gives them some rope, gives them some leash, and there's a bad outcome. And they're like, you should have been watching that, or you should have been supervised, failure to supervise, whatever. Like, and then you get held accountable. It's the willingness to stand up and say like, yeah, I did. This is why. And these are the steps that I took to try to get a good outcome. And hey, look, we don't win them all, right? Like, life happens. And what you're trying to do is understand that you can't make every decision yourself. That's why you're a supervisor, because you have, your little worker bees out there doing the thing, and that your job is to develop them into independent, self-sufficient creatures. And part of doing that means letting them learn a little bit through experience on their own. and then coaching them along the way. And you can backfill that with examples of times that you've checked them, right? And said, hey, we had an example like this. We talked about these things and it still went poorly. I should have anticipated and prepared them for that. Set up training. That's my bad. You're not pointing the finger at them. You're not blaming them. You're owning your role as a leader with the attitude of it's important that they learn how to make decisions on their own because we can't control every outcome. The enemy gets a vote. So yeah, that can be tough. And it's something that leaders have to embrace, and especially in the eye of the public, because the public demands perfection from us. And this is something that I talk a lot about with recruits is how well do you expect a professional football player to perform? Like the standard's pretty high, right? And how much time do they spend at practice versus games? I mean, for law enforcement, it's complete opposite, right? We spend very little time in training and all of our time out in the field doing the real thing. And so you have to think about these expectations are so high, but we do so little to prepare these guys. And we're surprised when we have these bad outcomes because they get spooked or startled and we haven't given them the tools and the resources and the training that they need to do better, right? And one of the things that I have tried to tackle over the years is that cops over the last several years now, I guess, 7-8 years, have felt attacked in some ways, right? And it's not to say that, cops are the martyr or anything like that, but we've been attacked in a lot of ways because the feeling is that you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You chase and catch the bad guys. People are mad because you used force and you had to catch people and break some things, right? If you don't catch the bad guys, you're worthless. You're not doing anything. You're just letting crime run rampant. You're just letting people get away. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to do here, right? And there's people across the country, police officers specifically, who have more or less stopped doing proactive police work, right? And just not trying to do the things that really most people in the community want us to do, which is catch bad guys. Because they just feel like it's not worth the risk. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to lose my job, lose my retirement, probably get prosecuted. And so this whole depolicing, defunding thing, there's a lot of cops who just, they don't give any more fucks. They're out. They're like, I'm just here. I'll respond to the calls, but I'm not going to go out of my way to look for trouble. Right. But I think most people and most of the public wants us to go out there and do the thing, right? If someone's breaking into their house and stealing their stuff, they want us to go out there and arrest that person and hold them accountable and get their car back, or their property back or whatever. They want that. But what we have to understand collectively is that from the inside, right, internally, as cops, we have to be more accountable to ourselves about the areas that we can do better. We can't just make every critique seem like an attack, right? It's got to be an opportunity to either try to get better training or illustrate, communicate whatever the haters might not understand or appreciate. I mean, this whole a scared cop is a dangerous cop. Yeah, well, they should be scared, right? Because they don't. In a lot of cases, we haven't given them the experience and the training and the resources and tools that they need to really be effective. I mean, if you ask a room full of people that is split down the middle, cops and not cops, and you ask everyone in that room, how many of you have ever been in a fight before? Every cop is going to raise their hand, right? And there's going to be a lot of people who've never been in a physical confrontation in their life. Well, was the little tiny bit of training they got in the academy really enough? I mean, because some of the people they're fighting spend, as a hobby, they go learn how to box or learn how to fight or whatever. So we're not doing a great job of equipping this. And these are opportunities where we want to be accountable. We want to be better, right? We're going to learn from our mistakes, and we use that to advocate for what we really need, right? And I really want you to see those haters, right? Those critiques as opportunities, because we can illustrate that a lot better, right? If we accept that, hey, yeah, that guy got spooked and that wasn't the right call, but here's why it went that way. And it's because the subconscious part of our mind makes an assessment of a problem about whether or not we can cope or manage with that when it determines how well that fight or flight response is going to either help or hinder us. Because sometimes it hurts us and sometimes it helps us, right? It speeds up our reaction time. It controls it diverts the flow of blood, right? Like there are ways that it helps us, but there's also ways that it hurts us. And so there's a version of this talk that I give to recruits as part of a class. There's something I always wrap up, and that's reminding them that we are usually the most adversarial members of government that most people will ever deal with, except for maybe like the DMV, right? Because I think that can be pretty adversarial at times. But it's important to remember that part of our values, right, America's values, go back to a time where the people of this country felt oppressed and unfairly treated by their government. So they revolted and built a new nation, right, and did their own thing. So I think it's important for cops to embrace the role that they play in society, because when we make decisions, we need to be the balance, right? We need to do things that are in the interest of society, right? Not the interest of ourselves, but in society. We have to be accountable. And that means not having an us versus them approach to our enforcement. It's not, oh, you just wouldn't understand. It's let me explain why that's difficult, right? If one of the things I see people do on the internet that drives me nuts is like, well, if you haven't worn a badge and a gun, then, I don't care what you think. It's like, well, you better care what they think, because they're the voters and the taxpayers and the citizens we swore an oath to. So you've got to do your part. So be accountable, use that as an opportunity to lead and to influence and to persuade, right? And be the balance. We're serving them, right? Collectively, we law enforcement are serving the common man, and you need to base your decisions on what's best for the common man and woman and child and whatever. But the families of those neighborhoods you patrol, not the technicalities, right? Like a lot of people get really wrapped up in like, well, the law is the law is the law. And it's like, well, have you ever read most state laws? Like some of those are not well written, right? And some of them, arguably probably shouldn't exist. I mean, there's laws on the books in Arizona still that date back to, times when, I don't know, probably like establishment of the state. I don't know, like late 1800s or something. There's some laws out there that you're like, how is that even relevant today? But they're still there. They're still on the books because they haven't been, repealed or whatever. So don't get caught up in the technicalities. Get caught up in the big picture. That's what I want you to think about. And is a scared cop a dangerous cop? Well, it's complicated is the thing, right? We have to learn how to manage stress. That doesn't happen in a classroom. It happens in real life on some level. And so we've got to figure out where those balances are and learn from our mistakes in a sense. And every cop in the room has an opportunity to do that on their own, learn from their mistakes, whether they have good leadership or not, right? You have the opportunity to learn through case studies, through past experiences, through watching videos, and to be accountable to yourself and to each other, right? Hold each other accountable, set the standard. Informal leadership goes a long way here as far as culture goes, within your squad or your team. Set the stage for improvement. It goes a long way. So is a scared cop a dangerous cop? Sometimes, but let's get better. That's the idea. All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire of constantly having to rack your slide to reset the trigger. With Dry Fire Mag, all you do is clear your weapon, load this training mag up, and work on your trigger work. Check them out on dryfiremag.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, You can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.